mute. Sorry. How was that? It's always amazing.
I want to say, Jon Younger, thank you for the introduction, John. I appreciate it.
Okay, Max, what did you end up with?
John.
Yeah.
These breakout sessions remind me of my dating experience in college. Like the girls they immediately just turn up and leave right in the middle of it.
I love it.
Thankfully,
that's awesome.
Between Doug, at least you went on for 5 minutes. That's a long time.
Thank you.
So great. Who did you talk to, Doug?
I talked to, my God, I had such a nice conversation. And Terry, I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names, but Terry is great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, that's my favorite part of these calls. And it's certainly Ray Foote, our good friend, who from Reboot was the one who introduced this right during the midst of COVID. And I think it was really healing for me to facilitate that. Right. Hey, I know, let's get some introductions because I know there's some new people on the call. Anybody? Ruben, I know this is your first one. Would love for you to introduce yourself.
I mean, I'm not a storyteller like you are, John. So, I mean, I've only got about 30 seconds, but I'm the new CTO of Open Assembly. So many exciting things are afoot. I won't say too much right now. I'll leave that to John to explain if he wants to, but we're building some really exciting stuff. And I think in a few months' time, we'll have some incredible announcements. My background is basically tech startups. So if you want to talk about tech startups, that's all me. I've also done a PhD in AI, but mostly, the goal is to make open talent work for people. Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Ruben. We had a great, just kind of as an intro, we had a great tech workshop with Doug and with Ruben and Dave Messenger and Barry and Bryn and Mike Morris. It was really fantastic 2 days. It's really hacking through Jon Younger, John Healy, hacking through what does the market need? How do we take friction out of the system so that enterprises have a much easier time buying open talent. So it's lots to come, and really appreciate everybody that was there. Lots of great stuff. Also a big shout out to Balaji, who, you were there in spirit, Balaji, with your 2 slides. It was
that's all I contributed. 2 slides.
Yeah, but the 2 slides were, half a day. With your slides are so good that it takes like 4 hours to unpack them and really understand the meaning of them.
It was great. I had a 7-hour flight. That was just 2 slides covered. That was my whole flight covered. It was great.
You need like 100 hours of consulting on top of that too.
Exactly.
Make sense of it. So.
Right, for sure. Like as Barry says, consulting slides worth $10,000 a piece. That's why the decks are so long. So, yeah. Anybody else that's new?
Hey, John, Terry Reibold here. I'm new. And
hey, Terry. Oh, yeah. Hey, Terry. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So here's how this goes. I'm having coffee with John and Barry last week in Cambridge, and they're like, hey, you should be part of this call. And I'm like, cool, what's it about? And he said, shut up and just show up. So here I am.
Yeah, Terry, explain to people what you do. I love what you're up to, and you've written a couple of really cool books. And
thank you. Yeah, so Live Exchange is an open marketplace specifically focused on the CX space, on the customer experience space at scale. So the challenges that these organizations are facing in their customer care organizations with recruiting, workforce efficiency, and just overall the looking for high quality talent is a global issue that's going on. And so that's where Live Exchange steps in. From an overall marketplace, we bring the talent as well as the technology that enables that talent to work whenever, wherever on our client's behalf. Great to be here and excited to be continuing a part of this the organization.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. And we had such an amazing conversation. Really appreciate your thought leadership. And it seems like you've worked out a lot of the really nitty gritty details that all of us need to figure out how to work out. So thanks for sharing all that stuff. Hey, Kyle, we talked yesterday. It's, good to see you.
Yeah. Thank you. Good to see you again. I see a familiar faces on the call. I'm an open innovation advisor at ExxonMobil. Across our whole entire corporation, I'm a one-man army. Crowdsourcing, open sourcing, different engagement models with vendors, academics, etc. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm here to learn. I'm here to grow. And even from the intro call today, I've already broadened my mind a little bit. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm really humbled to be here and to learn and grow with you all.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. And just for some context, Kyle works with an amazing human being, Rich Copsey. Rich was was an Anadarko and did some of the super cutting edge stuff in open innovation in the oil and gas business, and something we documented at Harvard and did a lot of consulting with. So super good to see you here. We've got the next one. We've got iPhone. I don't know who that is, but iPhone, would love to hear from you.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
My laptop decided to do its update right now, so
no.
my phone.
yeah.
Apologies there. Yeah, my name is Paul Michaelenko. Jon Younger invited. I haven't met any of you yet, but I'm excited about this. I'm the founder and CEO of a platform called Bloom. We're building the next generation of what a freelancer operating system looks like behind the scenes, how they manage their business.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Super psyched to have you here. And who we have next? Sakshi. Did I get that right? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, that's
Paul.
Paul. Yeah, Paul. We got you, and then Sakshi's next. Sakshi.
Can I go ahead? Hi,
Yeah.
Hi everyone. I'm Sakshi, and I'm from Delhi, India. I've been on the call before. I was invited in the month of August to speak on a report that we have come out with. I am from Niti Aayog, which is a think tank for the government of India. And the last time I was here, we had a discussion on our report talking about the opportunities in the gig and platform sector in India, and opportunities especially for vulnerable groups like women, persons with disabilities. And Mark recommended that I join the discussion regularly. So looking forward to learn from all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sakshi. Your presentation was really, really amazing. And if anybody hasn't heard her presentation from Nidhi on how the Indian government's looking at, the freelance and platform marketplace, maybe Brandon, you could hit push the recording into the chat so everybody can kind of catch up on that. But it was super excellent. It definitely shifted my mindset on how this open talent marketplace can be such a powerful economic enabler for second-tier countries to really catch up, right? To be able to play this cross-border economic opportunity really, really well. So thanks for being here. Maxine.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. This is my first session. Got an invite from Chuck Hamilton, who's one of my advisors. I'm the CEO of Pick My Brain. Pick My Brain is a platform that makes it really easy for anyone to package, price, and sell their knowledge. We're building what we want to call the world's largest knowledge marketplace. Imagine if you could pick any brain in the world on demand. And we're on a mission to facilitate 1 million conversations, and we're just starting to build knowledge marketplaces for communities, associations, and alumni organizations. And really interested to, just participate. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. Thanks so much. It sounds like a really interesting product, and looking forward to hearing more. Who's next? Liliana. Oh, I think there you go.
Yes. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. As I was saying to Steve earlier in the small chat, I didn't quite expect it would be so interactive. So this is really from the top of my head. I was invited to this by Thorsten. We met at this economist conference on sustainability here in London, UK, a couple of weeks ago. And my background is academia. I studied political economy. Once upon a time, I did a PhD dissertation on post-communist transformations, Romania in particular, privatization, I taught at various universities for a while, international political economy. So coming to the broad picture of how changes and transformations occur and so on. And then some years into that, I started doing some more practical things with companies. But I'm basically set up as a freelancer myself. So I'm very, very curious about everything that's on offer here. Very excited to hear that so much is on offer. And I'm going to go and check these platforms and so on, and perhaps spread the word. One of my anchors in London is the Royal Society of Arts, where they've had a large program for the future of work. So I'm familiar with the future of work types of events. A number of organizations here are interested. So I may be in a position to spread the word. And anyway, I'm interested to learn.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Hey, Mallory, how's it going?
Hi, wonderful. Thanks. It's great to be here. This is, my first time. Even though I am from the States, I actually also reside in London, UK. I've been here for about 2.5 years now. So I actually, from Jon Younger, found this group from an article that he had posted on Forbes. And I'm a veteran of the recruiting industry, but somewhat new to kind of this open work freelance space. I've recently joined as the head of our sales, a startup called Talent Ferret. And so it's doing something unlike anything else that's out there, where it is a discovery platform that plugs into LinkedIn to find freelance talent. Yet we have a very complex scoring system and algorithm. So I was doing some numbers today, and out of 11.5 million profiles scored, only 8% actually came through. So it's different. And I think this will be a really great community to kind of get involved with, learn a lot about, what we can do different. We're still in development. So we have some development partners that are working with us, but no paying customers yet at the moment. We're just starting to kind of go there. I'll put the links to kind of our fun Talent Ferret into the profile. And I really look forward to meeting everyone.
Thanks, Mallory. That's awesome. Really look forward to seeing the technology. And as you guys heard, one name keeps coming through every conversation. He's kind of the OG, right? The godfather of a lot of this stuff. So Jon Younger, you got some stuff too, I think, to talk about.
I do, and I'll just take a couple, 3 minutes. This is an unabashed commercial for CTW. So just enjoy this moment if you can. I've been so excited by some of the stuff that's been going on. We've added another one. I want to start by giving you my favorite current statistic. Two-thirds of the freelancers in our large global study last year said that they were making enough or more than enough money and doing enough or more than enough work. 1/3 said they were not doing enough work and needed to do more and weren't satisfied financially. The people who were doing well were experiencing an extraordinary level of burnout associated with fear that they wouldn't do well in the future and that this was their last hurrah. And the folks that already had concerns were continuing to feel that burnout because they weren't sure how to fix the situation. I mention this because for the very first product in what we're calling CTW Working Knowledge, what we're trying to create, and we need your help, are tools and frameworks that solve a variety of banal, mundane, but terribly important problems facing freelancers. One of those is burnout. And so what I think that Brandon will send to each of you is a little article that I wrote initially for myself, but then Brandon and I thought it might be interesting for other folks. It might be something that would be useful, as John Windsor suggested, for those of you that have blog spheres and are looking for more material, if you'd like to share it with individuals, etc. But the very first thing I wanted to just say is this is an issue that's endemic right now, and hopefully what we've got is a bit of a survey based on research by Christina Maglack at Berkeley that really provides a useful self-report for how you're doing around burnout. And then what I'd ask you to do is two things. One is read the article, take the test, and see if it's a useful thing for you, and see if it's a useful thing for those in your community. And the second is, we'd love your advice on other banal, mundane, day-to-day kinds of tools, models, frameworks, etc., that would help you and your colleagues, because we'll prepare that stuff and provide it as a regular service of CTW. Make sense? Brandon, did everybody get a copy?
I'm going to share it after the call.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
All
Thanks.
right.
That was it.
Thanks, John. Always good to hear what you're up to, and really appreciate your leadership here. It's really awesome. Now, speaking of another like OG, Bryan Pena. Man, when did we meet, Bryan? I think we might have met at SIA, maybe 2017 or 2000, a long time ago.
We didn't really start getting connected until I think like the pandemic.
Yeah, probably.
Boshi kind of.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, just I've always, really respected Bryan because he's had a finger on the pulse. He was at SIA for a while and started the CTW there and the gig economy conference. And so I know you went to that conference this year, and you have such long history in that space, and it's still a really important conference. The SIA just came out with a really good report. I think it's one of the best reports about market size and what's happening with the open talent economy. But Bryan, you're going to share some things for us with what you saw and what's happening over in that space.
Yeah. Thank you, John Squared, John H, and John O. It's like I feel like we have the Godfather, grandfather, and my cool uncle on the same phone call. So thank you, Brandon and John, and John Healy asked me to speak a little bit about the CTWS Summit. For those of you who aren't familiar, the CTWS Summit in the gig economy is the longest standing sort of event geared towards the contingent workforce, the extended workforce, the open talent workforce, whatever you want to call it. It's been going on for about 15 years, and I was a part of the organization for 11. So I have the event and the organization is near and dear to my heart. And considering so much of the conversations that we have here are about the future of work and open talent and how organizations are taking advantage of it, this is the single largest gathering of major enterprises on the planet to discuss that very thing. So what I want to talk about today is just a little bit about the event, what they talked about, some of the key themes from the event. There are some folks on the phone who were there. I think Rich Wilson was there, so he can share his perspective as well, specifically as a newcomer and a Shark Tank provider. And then if we have time, I'll kind of break down some larger trends and some ideas on what might be useful. But without any further ado, let's get right into it. So can you see the screen okay?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we're going to talk about the CTWS Summit. So the CTWS Summit, the first we're going to talk about, the CTWS Summit, SIA, and GIGI are basically two events during the same week. The first of it is the longest standing one, which is called the CTWS Summit Contingent Workforce Strategy Summit. That was September 19th and 20th in Dallas. Approximately 500 companies were represented, and this is a little bit of a different sort of event. 500 companies were represented in total, 1,200 total attendees, and it's the longest running event. This is what we used to call a sponsor-led agenda, meaning every single session that you see here is sponsored by one of the 57 or 60 sponsors of the event, and they contribute materially both to the content direction and the discussion, usually in panel form. Why is this important? This is important because a lot of the narrative that you see on the next slide when I share all the titles and what the discussions were conversations that were ideated and driven by some of the largest sponsors and largest enterprises who are focusing on this on the planet, and things they want to lead with and things they feel are going to be really important discussion points. And so this is a breakdown of all of the different titles of the different sessions. It was 3 tracks over the course of 2 days. I didn't get into some of the keynote sessions or stuff like that. And so as you look at this list and you look at all of the things that they're talking about, does anything jump out to anybody on the phone as something that's consistent or striking? And if they want to dive into that in a little bit differently before I go into the other conference. Again, remember, these are the sorts of things that major providers, Adecco, Manpower, Randstad, These are the things that they think people want to talk about and things that are pushing. Anything in general?
I don't see the word gig.
Or
No.
open talent.
Nope, open talent or gig. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm going to go into that in a couple of minutes.
There's also,
yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's also nothing about gig as a pathway. They're thinking about it almost as mutually exclusive with the workforce, nothing about how gigs can help recruit and hire.
Yes. So a lot of this is geared towards what we call the program manager. Most major enterprises have one person who is solely responsible for managing the non-employee workforce. That is someone who is, their title might be, vice president of extended talent, vice president of contingent work, VP of non-employee solutions, whatever those things are. These events are geared towards that audience. So this is what we call a sponsor-led, heavily qualified event, meaning other than the sponsors, everybody who attends is heavily vetted. And I think because of people on the phone who tried to sign up and were summarily denied because it's only only the sponsor target groups are allowed to attend. So if you're not an enterprise buyer, you're not going to be able to attend this unless you're sponsoring. So this is very much kind of talking to what the market feels is going to be important to those people running the programs. Some of the things that I think are really missing in here, there's not a whole lot of things about career pathing, more flexible new ways of working, really looking at cost and value, strategic discussions. Most of the discussions here seem very tactical in nature, solving very discrete problems, those sorts of things. So this is, again, what the market feels is important to the enterprise buyer. On the heels of that is what is called collaboration in the gig economy, that is colloquially called GIGI. That was September 20th and 22nd. Again, over 500 companies were represented, 900 total attendees in general. It's a greater focus on newer work models. And the agenda is geared towards more technology and solutions from a staffing perspective. That's a key kind of thing. The DNA of the organization, Staffing Industry Analysts, has a heavily focus on providing insight and value to staffing firms. So now let's look at the agenda there. What are some of the things that strike you when you look at that list? Because this audience is truly an open audience. Anybody can go, suppliers and buyers. I would say it's about 50% suppliers of services, staffing firms, talent platforms, and what we would call qualified attendees, who are much more interested in the future of work than maybe people who may attend the other event. Does anything jump out to anybody here? There's a lot of stuff around M&A, back office sort of things, employer of record, private equity, buying and selling your staffing firm. Again, very tactical things. Nothing there, again, about career pathing, talent development, really holistic talent strategies, things like that. Anyone? Anything jump out?
It's also focused on gigs equal staffing. There's zero strategic.
Yes. Very tactical, very, not a whole lot of strategic. So Rich, I'm going to put you on the spot. Rich Wilson from Gigs, you were there. What did you think about the events?
Hello. No, I enjoyed it. I actually managed to blag my way into CWS using my old Allegiance contacts. So I actually managed to go to both. There was a very different vibe at both in terms of, obviously the talk tracks, but also I think just the general feeling. There was a lot more positivity in the air at the GIGI. I think there was some really interesting trends that I picked up on in some of the sessions. First one was a lot of talk about staffing platforms as a service, which is an acronym of SPAAS. So that was particularly interesting about, the way I look at that, and it's something that, my good friend Jon Younger has wrote about. That's really white labeling talent platforms to staffing companies.
Yes.
So that was something that came up a lot. It's not had mass adoption, but it was getting talked a lot about. I think the other thing was the rise of the I can't count how many EOR platforms there now is. You know, that shows something that's really interesting. That shows that, and all of them are targeting, and we're paying a lot of money to be there to target talent platforms. So, you know, that shows, again, very anecdotal, but that shows that the rise of the platform is real. Because why are all these EORs? One of the company that actually won a Shark Tank, not that I'm better, that was an EOR for healthcare talent platforms specifically. So I think, again, you see a rise there. And then last but not least, I think every VMS company that was talking, whether it be Beeline, whether it be Pro Unlimited / Magnet, whoever it be, they were all talking about partner solutions and APIs. Didn't always make sense. I think there was a bit of confusion about what an API is and how that actually works. That it's some magic piece of technology that changes everything and makes VMSs sexy. Maybe don't agree with that one, but there is obviously a growing adoption from VMSs to start looking at talent platforms. I don't think they figured it out how to do it. I'm happy to be part of figuring the problem out, but I think they were the kind of key three things that that I took out that I thought were really interesting with some of the themes that, again, people in this call have been writing about and some of the things that we've been hearing.
Thank you for that. And you were robbed in Shark Tank, by the way. I just want to say it. I want to say you were robbed.
Nobody understood what I was saying, Brian. That was the problem.
So Rich went on stage wearing a kilt, for those of you who were curious about it. So good for him.
That deserved the one in its own, but obviously not.
He was the one showing his calves more than anybody. That in and of itself won an award. Some of the themes that were consistent throughout the event were diversity and inclusion. Now, diversity and inclusion has two major dimensions. There's supplier diversity and candidate diversity. Both in many firms are equally paid attention to. Supplier diversity in terms of offering opportunity to smaller, newer, more diversity-owned suppliers, than a candidate diversity, which is encouraging platforms and technologies to encourage and hire more diverse groups. As legislation expands to incorporate contingent work and other forms of employee work, it's important to incorporate the extended talent platforms, their diversity pools as well, because that's going to start to be incorporated. Agent and employer record services, which is basically the engagement mechanism that companies use to hire and manage individuals. That, to Rich's point, has gotten a tremendous amount of attention. A lot of the companies in this particular space are getting just insane valuations. Deal got a $2.5 billion valuation. Papaya Global, I think they're up to $4 billion valuation. So that has set a lot of folks on fire to be able to provide agent and employer record services. And it's an area of great interest and where there's a lot of money flowing into it. The evolution and inclusion of talent platforms was top of mind for everybody. But unfortunately, the actual adoption continues to really lag in terms of these solutions taking on sort of real momentum in opportunity and scale. And then some of the things that were really key, the future of the MSP, and I'm going to go into what that is in just a second. And then this notion of direct sourcing was the hot topic across all the conferences 100% of the time. So before I kind of get into some of the stuff that I've prepared, any other questions about the event or thoughts that you want to share before we dive into some of the other stuff?
Brian, can I ask you a question? I think maybe I'll also get some perspective from other people. Like all of the intermediaries that you're showing, and also let's say the supply side of it, there is not a single intermediary segment that has any level of customer satisfaction. Nobody likes their VMS. Nobody likes their MSP. Nobody likes their EOR. At least on the staffing platform side, or at least the marketplace side, there's some mixed perspectives on some are liked, others are not liked. But universally, all the intermediaries are hated. Universally, it feels like there's something fundamentally wrong with the connecting supply to demand. That these are old models that have been tinkered with where the satisfaction has not changed in the last 5 years that I've been associated with. Mm-hmm. What are we missing as a space?
I got to tell you, Balaji, it's almost that's an unfair question, because that leads perfectly into what I was going to talk about, because I saw the same thing. And while I'm a big believer, I think that SIA does those events as well as anybody on the planet. A lot of the themes, if you just change the hairstyles and what people are wearing, some things that we could have been saying 5 or 10 years ago. And that comes primarily from a lot of the sponsor-led narratives. So what I want to do to that point, if you'll indulge me in just a second, I'm gonna dive right into that, and then we can talk in greater detail, because I think there's a very distinct reason why that occurs. So leading into the kind of meat of what we want to talk about is this notion of, we all recognize we're on the phone today because we recognize that the future of work is fundamentally changing. It's in the top of everyone's mind. Gig work, from the guy who wants to make an extra $15.05 on Fiverr, to looking at leveraging talent marketplaces as a strategic resource. So we have to go back and look at some of the origins of how organizations leverage and manage the acquisition and management of people. So I've used this particular discussion point for a number of years. This is a great article from Harvard Business Review that talks about how human resources needs to make an evolutionary change from being a tactical resource to being a strategic one, how to get a seat at the table for folks in HR. And it's been a common struggle and issue for them. And when we think about what traditional HR, human resources, is focused on, has been, really only two major buckets: employees only. And if they do think about it, they think about a very, very narrow perspective in terms of how they consider their strategy for non-employees. They're either a temp worker or they're a freelancer. And that's pretty much the universe that traditional HR really cares about. Human resources, that's the way it's taught in schools. That's the way that they're trained organizationally. But pretty much that's been historically. But what we've seen is a need for new types of workforce solutions. It's becoming overwhelmingly complex to employ people. Every day there's new legislation that makes it difficult to hire some people. For example, in California, there's new legislation, SB 1162, that requires enterprises to report enterprise pay rate data and diversity statistics for everybody who's in their building, whether they're an employee or a contingent or a temp. That's complex and difficult to manage across hundreds of suppliers. It's lack of transparency. You don't really know. There's a lot of information asymmetry in how you manage these people, what they're paid, where they come from, those sorts of things. There's lack of institutional know-how. How do you go about deploying these sorts of tools? How do we build a talent strategy? The technology is complicated and hard to use at scale across thousands of engaged workers. And then, of course, you see the evolution of the workforce. People are expecting remote work. They want to have mobility. They want to be able to work from wherever they want and do what excites them. It's getting ever increasingly risky to engage people. And then finally, there's mistrust and frustration. How do we trust the supply base? How do we trust these solutions are going to say what they're going to do? And I'm incredibly frustrated to do that. These are the sorts of things that are barriers to this particular idea, and this sort of manifesto, which is a call to action for people in HR and corporate functions to think differently. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing. That article is from 1997. So we've been having this conversation about functions like human resources to think differently for 20 plus years, now 30 years almost. So what's changed? Those same things are there, mistrust and frustration, but what we're finding now is that it's incredibly difficult to teach old dogs new tricks. Everybody on this phone recognizes that the workforce of tomorrow is very, very different than that previous slide, which just shows those two options. There's different types of employees, from apprentice and interns to also employees who choose to be entirely mobile. There's ways you can engage a temp worker or a freelancer, SOW, online worker through an Upwork sort of solution. There are strategic partnerships, volunteers, franchisees. You can leverage a crowd. You can think about drones and AI, and all the other ways in which you can choose to leverage human capital and knowledge-based resources. But you know what most people think about when we think about addressing those talent sources, or how do we handle a talent shortage? Most of them think about just raising rates. Let's just pay people more. Instead of thinking more holistically about how do we go about resolving a strategic talent issues, and how can we put all these different tools together to build a holistic talent strategy that allows us to source from as many resources as possible. This is from the 2022 buyer survey, also from SIA. And you can see, how do you address talent shortages? It's basically all of these are tactical solutions. These are just ways to raise pay rates. There's nothing about really holistically reevaluating the role of people in our business. How do we build a strategy that enables the organization to be more competitive against its peers? It's all the same sort of thing, right? And I think one of the reasons why we see that is for this next slide. This is also a breakdown of different sort of high-level solutions, also from the 22 buyer survey. And these are just some key sort of methodologies that organizations are using in their enterprise-based programs. So if you look at the slide, you'll see the dark blue answers the question, is this solution in place today? Light blue, or I don't know if that's light bluish gray. I don't know, I can't tell. Someone tell me. Put that in the chat what color that is. Likely to be explored in the next 2 years. And then this other areas that they not planning to do it at all. So overwhelmingly, that you'll see 3 key themes. One, managed service providers. What is an MSP? We'll go into what that is, but essentially that is a third party that companies engage to manage their non-employee workforce and workforce supply base. 62% of major enterprises already have this type of solution in place. From there, we have IC compliance, which is essentially what Rich and Balaji mentioned as AOR, EOR, employer of record, agent of record services that companies, large enterprises use to defray the risk that comes from hiring individuals specifically. And then at the bottom is the prevalence of what we call vendor management systems. These are SaaS-based platforms that companies engage to use and usually leveraging an MSP or an internal program to manage their non-employee workforce. To Balaji's point, historically speaking, all of these have struggled with relatively low NPS scores, and they've struggled to kind of really implement a lot of these holistic sort of more forward-thinking strategies. They pretty much need to evolve. Any questions on that so far, or perspectives? Okay, keep on going then. So what is an MSP? Okay, so this is going to be important. Everybody here wants to sell to a major enterprise. You need to be aware what these companies are. So the first MSP kind of started in 1993. Ford Motor Company launched PeopleNet. So for all the frustration that we might feel dealing with this organization, we can thank Ford Motor Company for modern workforce management. Okay, so you can blame them. It was mainly this notion here. It was a manual process, heavily on paper, but they implemented some automation in 95. But what is a managed service provider? So these are the company that enables an organization to centrally manage external service providers or an organizational function, such as human capital. You could have an MSP for your mailroom, for your IT call center, but in our parlance, we've hijacked this notion of MSP to outsourcing the oversight of your third-party staffing suppliers and the like. And so what that means is the entire extended workforce strategy is often defaulted to these third parties. We see the prevalence there. So why would someone select an MSP in the first place, right? So I've deployed 3 myself when I was an enterprise buyer, and I work with talent platforms right now to develop partnerships with forward-thinking MSPs as a part of my practice. But why would someone select an MSP in the first place? One, back to the same reason we had before. It's overwhelmingly complex. There's no transparency. There's no know-how on how to manage this. Complicated, hard to use technology. There's mistrust, institutional mistrust. I can tell you back in the very beginning when I deployed my first MSP in 1998 when I was 13 years old, we had many, many instances of staffing suppliers charging 400% markup or 300% markup for low dollar roles, and contracts were inconsistent. So what that bred was an institutional sort of mistrust of the supply base. And that mistrust gave rise to a number of incredibly unpopular solutions in the way that we treat providers now. Programs evolve over time. So in the beginning, they're relatively decentralized with very little oversight at the organizational level. From there, you might go down to a less to preferred suppliers. Maybe you'll consolidate that into a master vendor with one major staffing firm, but that might not work because that particular provider can't deliver services in every region. So that's when you think about an MSP, where you can have one provider to manage the best of all possible solutions across dozens of countries, dozens of localities, dozens of business lines, hundreds of skill sets. You'll engage a third-party provider to do that. And once you're able to really leverage that to the best of your ability, you'll get into this notion of total talent management, which is where you're looking at managing your employee and extended workforce using the same sort of strategy. All of these are at their highest level, and the goal of any program is to leverage human capital as a strategic competitive advantage. So that often falls into a couple of different buckets, and it's a reason why we see a lot of these sort of nuanced solutions not take flight. Well, if we look at this, and the reason why, we look at this at the bottom, the first 4 stages of evolution are procurement-related problems. You have procurement-related solutions, people who are focused on risk mitigation, supplier optimization, contract execution, program adoption. That's a procurement concern. Things that we're thinking about leveraging human capital in more creative firms, that's more of a human resources concern. Most
Bryan,
human
can
resources.
I jump in for a sec?
You absolutely may, John.
Thank you. The challenge, I think this is fab. I think it's a wonderful slide. Here's my challenge. As a former HR leader, we don't have a client at the enterprise yet. We have a bunch of sub-clients for different bits, but nobody owns the 5th level. And I promise you, no matter what VPs of HR say, they don't own total talent management. They own total full-time talent management, and they're hoping that the rest of it works out. And it's a big challenge. I believe that one of the biggest challenges we face as an industry, and certainly for Open Assembly as an organization, the sooner and the better that we teach enterprises how to be partners with us and how to own this stuff, and how to make sure that somebody's in authority, in accountability at the enterprise level, I think it's going to be tough and tough.
I completely agree. I mean, I think one of the common themes that you'll see with a lot of these programs is that HR is more often than not interested in getting involved at all. There are many program managers who used to be clients of mine who I still continue to work with, and they lament the fact that they're not getting anything other than cursory support from the HR function, because they feel their role is simply focused on the traditional versions of HR. So to me, one of the reasons why we're seeing this lack of innovation, lack of real openness towards focusing on the customer experience more, the talent experience more, and considering more creative solutions to traditional problems, is because there's really no one who's able to describe that perfect vision of the future and be able to connect that to the organizational goals, right? And so a lot of time when I work with different clients is spent on helping them align how human capital and how talent creates this notion of competitive advantage. So the more that we can frame things in how we increase our institutional competitiveness through open talent, the more likely we're able to drive those business outcomes. Anyone who's ever worked at a large organization, specifically one that had a plant managers or really strong operating units, recognize that the operating units will consider any solution that is able to squeeze that much more productivity from their solution, or any solution that's able to get items out the door that much faster. That's going to drive adoption much more quickly than command down. So this notion of tying talent to increasing competitiveness, to me, is one that I think we need to, as an industry, get much more comfortable with aligning and how that happens.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
All of the benefits under the MSP sound like the absolute right ones. What is broken in the system, in the upstream, downstream incentives, that those benefits either are non-realized, or because those are the benefits, it creates experience issues within the enterprise? Because I think in the end, that's what you solve, so that you solve the issues in the business, right?
Well, this is one of my favorite metaphors is who's the most important person in a supermarket, right? And when the example that I use, the most important person in the supermarket is the guy who bags groceries, because if he keeps on putting the soup cans on top of the eggs, you're never gonna go back, right? It's the same thing here. It's most of these programs and most MSPs have the right strategy, the right people making the right decisions, but it often doesn't get down to the program level, where the people who are running the program day to day are not incented to really drive these new solutions, because they're just incented on very tactical measures of time to fill, customer satisfaction, rate management, very tactical solutions. And there's very little of these MSPs who are actively driving on a consistent basis across the organization these newer work modes. And that's something that they're very interested in. You can look at some of the conversation points, and that's why I really wanted to focus on the content of the agenda items, because you can see these are the things that they want you to focus on and they want you to talk about. They seem to want to drive that strategic narrative, but they're just still not institutionally aligning those incentives at the people who are charged with doing to making those things happen.
Brian, could I just jump in there for 2 seconds? Again, just maybe add to the question from Balaji there. So I was at Leaders Group for 12 years, right? AGS is obviously a massive MSP, was in Ford, got GM, vice versa. I ran tech systems, right, which is part of Leaders Group. We would not provide any contractors via the AGS MSP. That was my decision. The reason for that decision, again, just to kind of get it down to granular detail and backs up the point you said about the contingent managers. None of my team were allowed to have manager contact. They weren't allowed to qualify a role. They weren't allowed to do anything, because of all the rules. So if you think a talent platform can sail under the radar to a point until the spend gets over a certain threshold, but that's what we're doing just now. But from an MSP perspective, that's where it breaks down, right? The person buying the skill can't speak to the buyer, and MSPs put in so many rules and so much bureaucracy that makes the whole buying process for everybody, never mind the freelancer at the end of it, who has the worst buying experience in anybody because they're the commodity. That's where it all breaks down, right? Because nobody can talk, nobody can make a decision, nobody can do anything. That's as I said, I've done it for 12 years, and I banned us working via our own MSP for that very reason. Sorry.
No, I love it. I think we have time for any final comments. I think I'll just go ahead and close it there because I have more stuff, but we're way over time.
That was fantastic, Brian. As always, man, so much great depth of information and insights. Really appreciate it. I hope you can share some of the other stuff on an upcoming call, because I think there's a lot more to think about here. I'm not from the MSP VMS world, and it's so fascinating to me that these models are out there. That how do we start using the best of those models and apply them to the open talent marketplace, so that we can create less friction, more common language, more common process to make the buying easier for the enterprise.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is, I think we have to be very aware that there are structures in place that actively discourage the change that's required.
Yeah.
And I think that the more we're aware of the motivating factors and the barriers and the things that incorporate that economic friction that prevents change, the more successful we're going to be, because everyone on this call has great ideas and brilliant sort of ideas and ways to transform work, but it's going to fall flat in the face of existing bureaucracy, being aware of what those things are and figuring out how we can work within those constructs, at least for the time being, because at the end of the day, like Billy the Kid said, he robs banks because that's what the money is. We have to work with it.
Yeah, I love it, man. Great place to stop. Love you guys. Thanks a lot for an amazing conversation again. Make sure that you check out, some of the recordings if you didn't catch up on this one or came in late. Really fantastic stuff. So thanks again, Brian. Always great to hear you and your insights.
Thank you, Brian.
Always
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Right. All the
Take
best.
care, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.